It's really good to see you. How was Christmas?
Good
Awesome. What'd you get?
stuff.
Stuff. Video games?
Yes.
Oh, I like it. Did you get any Bitcoin?
What?
Never mind.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Welcome to the Skippy and Doogles show, baby.
Love it.
Welcome to the show. It's really good to see you. How was Christmas?
Good
Awesome. What'd you get?
stuff.
Stuff. Video games?
Yes.
Oh, I like it. Did you get any Bitcoin?
What?
Never mind.
You got any holiday gift ideas for people? What should people be buying people?
Anything that they want or they asked, but like if they didn't get the thing they want for their birthday, they could get for Christmas.
Oh, that's that Doogles logic.
Like
You know
it.
what I mean?
I like it a lot.
You know what I mean? Anything else that people need to know?
They need to know to not fight about presents and to
Yes,
not
I like
light fight.
Thank you, buddy. That was epic cameo. Epic cameo.
I thought he was going to come in and spit for like 45 minutes. Like, listen, let me tell you about Google stock.
Number one fan right there. Number one fan.
I can't wait to hear his stock tips, man.
He keeps those close to, he and Warren keeping those close to the vest.
That's the first appearance of the special consultant to the Skippy and Doogles show.
Yeah, exactly. People got chimpanzees throwing darts for their stock picks. We got little kids.
Yeah, we got little kids. And he's crushing it, let me tell you. I know his year-to-date performance, baby. And the reason our special consultant made an appearance is because it's the 1-year anniversary of the Skippy and Doogles show. Congrats, Doogles.
Five deuce.
This is our 52nd episode.
Can you believe? So the way for folks that are not in the know, which I think is everyone in the world that's not us, the way that this came about was we would talk about investing, like just as friends do. We'd have phone calls and whatnot, and then toward the end of last year, after one of our calls, we were like, should we start recording these and see what's up? Right? It was like, let's see what's up.
Yep.
And so it's wild thinking now that on a weekly basis, we've been doing this every week, nonstop on the road. Like you said last time, it was like the Amazing Race last time when you were saying, you're like
10 states, baby.
It's great. It's been really nice pontificating, perpetrating, and constituating with you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I appreciate you taking the time, and it's awesome that people like it. We're having fun with it, and hopefully we're providing some knowledge too. So year 2 is going to be exciting, Doogles. Oh man, we got some ideas, some scary ideas over here.
I'll tell you what's not exciting.
What's that?
Well, it's exciting for some, not exciting for Doogles over here, because 1 year ago when we first started recording this, what were we talking about at the beginning?
I think some of your idiotic stock picks in China.
Yeah, China Mobile, man. I had this hypothesis. I said, we got the world's largest mobile carrier by subscribers, China Mobile, over in China. They doing their 5G investments, and it was down. It was down 2020 a bit. And I said, I think this is gonna do its thing. So, I threw like 6 pence its way, and then delisted. And we talked about the ups and downs from that delisting.
Yeah, we debated what you're gonna do as the delisting was approaching, right?
Exactly. And I got freaked out and I sold, which was probably the right thing to do.
Good call.
Yeah, right thing to do. Now China Mobile is having a huge listing over in Shanghai. I was reading the press release, and it said 1 year ago today, Doogles sells China Mobile, and so we decided that we're just gonna mock him. So $7.64 billion is how much they're raising in the Shanghai IPO. Absolutely huge. Give or take a year from when they were delisted from the US, coming out with a huge IPO in Shanghai. I wish I could buy. I wish I could buy.
So refresh my memory here. Like because they had a U.S. listing, they got in trouble with the government. I think the Trump government, but it kind of carried over, right?
Yeah. They didn't get in trouble. It wasn't anything that China Mobile specifically did. What it was Trump, when he was president, he signed something that said that any organization that we believe has ties to or supports the Chinese military, it was a security issue, right? It has to be delisted. And so the telecom companies, so it was China Mobile, can't remember the other ones. I think China Telecom, and there was one other that I can't remember the name of, but they got delisted because it's information, right? Like they basically are the ones that are like are allowing information to be transmitted. And so they said that's a security concern in the US. They have ties to the Chinese military. And there were others that fell into there too, but those were big ones because they're such big companies. So it wasn't anything that China Mobile specifically did. It was that they are a telco in China.
Yeah. So, but they delisted here, and I think most of the U.S. investors pulled their money out. Are they still on the OTC market in the U.S.?
I don't think so. I haven't checked. But I don't think so.
Because that process is just so. I mean, we talked about this with scare tactics around Alibaba and Didi and other Chinese securities. Like that process is so foreign to me. I don't really know how like your ability to raise capital in one country dies and then you reissue the Shanghai shares. And it's like, if it was still on the OTCs, in the US, I don't know how that like competes with the shares listed in Shanghai in terms of like, it wouldn't formally be a class A, class B situation, but it's just a fascinating thing that haven't had time to research. So
I'll pour one out.
We'll do.
All right. 50-second fishbowl. What you got?
I want to really dive into a rabbit hole with you, and I hope I can articulate this right. Jack Dorsey had a fight with Andreessen Horowitz this week, it seems. Is that how you read the situation?
It seems like he had a fight with all venture capitalists. But yes, but specifically Mark Andreessen of A16Z.
Yes. So he started with a tweet that says 44,000 likes that says, "You don't own Web3," in quotes. The VCs and the LPs do. It will never escape their incentives. It's ultimately a centralized entity with a different label. Know what you're getting into. ... So fascinating. I saw this and just thought he was kind of having a hissy fit, but it turns out there's a lot more to this. And Doogles, I think what's happening here is he's rebelling against the way venture capitalists work in almost the startup world, that they've moved into crypto and are treating crypto like the startup world. And I think he hates that idea because the thing he loves, why he's a huge Bitcoin guy, is the decentralized piece. And so he sees these new cryptocurrencies, even the ones that have lots of promise and that the ones that I think of more as startup companies, he sees how rich A16Z and others is getting by effectively providing seed funds for these ICOs, and he's pissed about it. Thoughts?
That does seem like what's happening. I also would like to flag, I'm going to say, I think flag's the right word. I'm going to flag that it feels like a lot of this is actually what I'll call illusioned decentralization anyway.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember the exact number, but it's close to this. If you look at ownership in Bitcoin specifically, it's something like 0.1% of Bitcoin holders own like something massive, 80%, 90%. Like it's a massive percent of the value of Bitcoin. And so while the concept is decentralized, is it decentralized? Like I think that's a question that I have anyway. And so I think that is what Jack's all about, like what you just described. But what's the difference? I think is maybe the question that I ask. Like, why is it that he's pushing there?
I was trying to find that exact stat. I don't think it's quite that drastic, Doogles, but let's say that the makeup of Bitcoin in terms of holders of the wealth doesn't look that different from the makeup of like the US economy, right? In terms of a lot of the wealth sits with a small minority of the people. And so that is a counter argument to someone that goes, oh, this is this brave new economy that's good for the upstart individual. It's probably not. There's still a few fat cats getting rich off things.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not as stark not to be confused with Sark, not as stark as,
My favorite
what I
stock
said, but
pick.
exactly. It is, as of late October, 0.1% or 50% of the mining. That's not the value.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's pretty substantial. I'll try and find the value while we keep going too.
Well, and a lot of the really wealthy people, if you talk Bitcoin millionaires now, are people that started mining in 2013, 2014, sometime, and just didn't really know what to do with it, but thought it was a worthwhile exercise. So that's a little off topic. Where I want to tap into your startup expertise is like, what I think Dorsey's pissed off about is that something like Solana, which I've talked about on the show, takes a large majority of their initial coin offering, their ICO, and carves it out for VCs and early backers, I'll call it. And you can look at 20 other coins that have done something very similar. And so then the VCs have these huge chunks of coins at the best price available if it actually turns into something. And it's more likely to turn into something because of their backing, their funding, their resources, their connections, right? And
yep.
Dorsey's going, these people are doing nothing, and look at the wealth they're generating. Well, I love that he made me think about that this week, but my pushback is they do that all the time without crypto involved, just with a company, right? They come in, they hire the right CEO, they connect them to the right firm, they throw the right money here, and they have some of the most powerful connections in the world in terms of starting a business, and they've gotten wealthy off of it. They're doing the same thing in crypto, and I guess I don't know what to think about it. I mean, what do you think about this? Is this just the VC cycle of a really good venture capitalist?
Yeah, to me, it sounds the same. I think where one of the places Jack would probably push back on is either he or his beard would push back on is he would say that there's the opportunity for, I'm going to say Bitcoin in this case specifically, to be pure or purer. Like there's the opportunity for it. Like it can be a way that if you take it out of these hands, it's a way that the world can at least more democratically. And I don't mean that from a government perspective. I mean that from a like in the hands of the people perspective, be distributed. Like it's possible. And so get your grummy hands out of it. I think you might say like this naturally has an opportunity, quote unquote, naturally has an opportunity. I think that's probably what he'd come back and say. But I agree that's the same thing. I don't really necessarily see the difference.
I mean, where I'm hung up on, because you could talk about Twitter, or you could talk about Google, and you could say like, you could talk about any company you want, and you could say it's a great company that makes life better for the world's citizens. And I know that we push back on both those examples, but choose your own adventure. I don't necessarily get mad at the venture capitalists that came into Google 20 years ago and helped get the thing off the ground. I look at the potential that it has now. But I do understand the frustration. There's a good graphic that he retweeted of like the pipe of ICO activities, and it has 90% of the, delicious beverage falling into the venture capitalist's mouth and drops falling into the people's mouths. I totally get where he's coming from. And I love this thought experiment this week. I just wanted to get your take on it because to me, it seems like any other startup. And yes, the VCs are getting rich.
I'm going to throw in one other take on this.
Please.
It's a very different angle, but still in Web3. There was a piece that I read this past week by Tim O'Reilly, and it's called Why It's Too Early to Get Excited About Web3. Tim O'Reilly he's been part of the web and internet PC ecosystem for quite a while, a prolific writer, owns O'Reilly Media. And one of the things that he's known for in the space is coining the terms open source and Web 2.0. So he put out this piece, and what he's saying, this is different than the concentration piece, different than the VC piece, but I think it's really interesting with Web3, is he's saying that it's a bit too early to get excited because of the lack of infrastructure that's being built for it. And so one of the examples that he gives, actually, let me give a quote and then I'll give an example. A quote from this piece, he says, is if Web3 is to become a general purpose financial system or a general system for decentralized trust, it needs to develop robust interfaces with the real world, its legal systems, and the operating economy. An example he gives from that is what we talked about a few weeks ago on Constitution DAO. Remember Constitution DAO?
Yeah.
A DAO that got together and raised a whole bunch of money to buy the Constitution. So he said if they'd won the election, the Constitution would have been owned by a small group of people that own this LLC. There were no legal ownership rights for those people that contributed, right? Which he's saying is like, that's an example of how these things are actually disconnected from the real world systems, and you have to have that connection. One thing I loved in this piece, still around the infrastructure piece that he brought up, was he brought up this book, which I haven't read, but I'm going to go try and get my hands on it. This book by Carlota Perez from about 20 years ago called Technological Revolutions and Financial Capital. Have you read that?
No.
I'm going to go see if I can find this. So one important conclusion he brings up from the Perez book is that true technology revolution has to be accompanied by the development of substantial infrastructure. And here's some examples. He said for the first industrial revolution, this included canal and road networks.
Mm-hmm.
For the second, railways, ports, and postal services. For the third, electrical, water, and distribution networks. For the oil age, it was interstate highways, airports, refining and distribution capacity, and hotels and motels. And for the information age, it was chip fabs, ubiquitous telecommunications, and data centers. What it runs through is in the article, you go and read the post, because in the post it walks through these different these different time periods and accompanies them with bubbles. And what he says is that these bubbles happen, and then what organizations do is they overinvest because it's a bubble. Like there's a mania, they run and they overinvest in this infrastructure, and then even when the bubble bursts, you have all this vacant infrastructure that exists, and that infrastructure is then used by the next wave of folks that kind of come in and take advantage of it. So the .com one, you have a bunch of empty data centers, right? Like everyone built out, you have a bunch of pipe that had been developed, like Spectrum, right? That had been developed, and now people can come and use it. And with Web3, he's saying like there is no tie to the real world. There's no tie to infrastructure. And so it's too early for it to be able to succeed. So that was the take by the post. I thought it was a really interesting take.
So I love this, and I was just trying to find the book that I have in the mail because I've been fascinated with this idea, the bubble idea, and we've talked about it before, but I just purchased Pop, Why Bubbles Are Great for the Economy by Daniel Gross, because this idea of if we speculate that we're in a bubble right now, I want to see, it's natural for human nature to want to see the other side of that. I know that that's impossible, but I'm curious about it. And I want to try and better understand what infrastructure is being built today that might not be fully realized until 5 or 10 years later. So I love that take for sure. I didn't know all the Tim O'Reilly background. That's helpful too.
He's just always around and thinking. He's doing more than thinking, but like he's just kind of always around and writing, right? It's a great like brain to tap into. Never met Tim O'Reilly, so I don't know about what he's like in person, but yeah, really interesting.
All right, so let me try to tie up one loose end that we should have done earlier. When we talk about Web3, we didn't really define Web3. As far as I know, Web3 is being coined by Chris Dixon. Is that true? So first I heard of it.
No. Okay. Web3 first started coming about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I think something like that is when but it's changed like definitions, I think, a bit. But even I think it was who was behind Ethereum, because I feel like that's actually where
Vitaly somebody, yeah,
maybe I'm not sure, but I think it came from something like that. So, but Dixon's all up on it. Like he's probably making it, popularizing it.
I think he's popularizing it is the way to say it. As I think about it, but I don't know if this is the right definition. I hear people talk about Web 1 as like the Yahoos and the Netscapes, and it's there's stuff on the internet that you go out and consume, and then so it's kind of reading. It's extension of your newspaper almost. Then Web 2, I think, is more like the platforms come into play. So the social media, whether it's MySpace or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and there's a read-write relationship. You more are interacting with the web, and Web 3 is that next step where you're interacting, there's reading and writing going on, but then there's also an execution or exchange of goods seamlessly, like they talk about tying your crypto wallet to your browser. So theoretically, I know this has been talked about for 10, 15 years, but like you could pay 7 cents to read an article instead of paying $10 to subscribe to the New York Times. And you could read articles all over the web or exchange other types of commerce and goods in a way that should seamlessly tie commerce with internet browsing and activity. Is that how could you correct that for me, Douglas? Is there a better definition there?
Web 1 and Web 2, I think that's right. The only other thing I've seen ascribed to Web 2, but it's the same concept, is user generated content. But it's the same as in like there's a platform that you can put your own content in as opposed to being other people. And then Web 3, I've seen it described in a few different ways. There's the blockchain explicitly being tied to it, saying that it's the web built on blockchain. There's the decentralized versus centralized ownership concept. Trust I've seen being tied to it, that there's which I think that's also tied to blockchain implicitly, is that you know the source of all information that's trusted. But I haven't seen a clean definition that is stuck, at least so far. That's just
because it's not really here, I think. The point you do that's really good that the people that love blockchains get fired up about is that clear ownership. So if I gave a crazy example about distributing funds based on what websites I visit, kind of, if there were clear owners to the assets that I'm browsing, then some of that monetary flow could flow directly to the content creators / owners, which is a fascinating potential thought experiment as well.
I'm gonna jump on that Web 2.0 train.
Go for it.
All right, dip into the fishbowl. When I feel Web 2.0, I'm gonna pull it out, feel it. Here's what I'm gonna talk about. I want to talk about platforms. So first is what got me fired up recently. Recently is in a few months ago, plus like last week, got me fired up about platforms. So I'll talk about that. And then I'm going to dive into some intellectuality that I don't know what that was. I'm going to dive into it. A few months ago, I was opening up my email and I was excited for what could come in my email. I was like, my fortune cookie done told me something good's going to come. But what I saw instead was Roku sent me an email that said we were unable to finalize the deal with YouTube TV. You about to lose your YouTube TV. Now, let me tell you something. I'd take my Roku TV outside. I have like a little lightweight Roku TV. I take it outside, sit out in the nice summer weather, and I put on some sports. And I watch it. I just watch it, until in the wee hours. Wee hours for older folks like me is like 7. But I watch it for a while. And so now I said, with the Roku TV, I'm losing YouTube TV. Like that it's a big part of like the value, that was gotten there. So that was upsetting.
Yeah.
Last week, I got an email that said, this was from YouTube TV. So now we're like, now Roku talking about YouTube TV, now YouTube TV talking about Disney. And they're saying we couldn't finalize the deal with Disney. And so therefore you're losing your Disney channels, you're losing ABC, you're losing ESPN. I felt more okay with this because if I'm being honest, for about 15 to 20 seconds, livid. I was livid. I was like, what you took something from me that I had. Then I read a little further and it said $15 a month cheaper. And I went, oh, like I have ESPN Plus, right? I've subscribed to like Hulu. I've got Disney Plus. I was like, I actually don't need those channels on YouTube TV. So I'm good. So I'm just saving $15 a month. Right. And so then I felt really happy about it. About a day later, they came back and said, actually, we're good now at Disney. But so the Doogles emotional train is not what this is about. What this is about, though, is it got me thinking about the importance of ownership of content versus ownership of the platform that then distributes the content. And we've had a lot of platform companies that do not own the content that have been coming out, over whatever period of time. Right. We were just talking about Web 2.0. And so I started thinking, like, oh, which is more valuable? Is content king? Is platform king? Right. So I'll pause for a second, get your reaction, and then we can keep going.
I love this thought. This is something I've been a lot more interested in the past 5 years. That I don't think I gave this a moment's worth of thought like before that. But I'm sure we'll talk about the Spotify business model and others. I think this is a really important thing to understanding your investments. And as at the moment, I'm not convinced that the platform play is the appropriate play because you're always at the mercy of the people that price the content. And what I've seen happen frequently seems like if those platform providers make too much money, the content providers go, you know what, their margins are too good. we aren't charging enough for the content that we create, and the platform providers get caught in this vicious cycle of being at the mercy of someone else.
And I think that that's the reason why you're seeing more platform companies now creating their own content. And by now, I mean, it's been happening for a minute, right? You go back to Netflix, House of Cards, which then like sparked a whole bunch. Like it's owning that whole value chain.
Yep.
Is awesome. So I went back to this piece called The Platform Economy that was from Sparkline Capital, and it was written back in December 2020. So I came across it more recently than that. I went back and reread it because I was so fired up. When I get fired up, I got to go read about investments.
This is all because what? Because YouTube sent you an email?
Yeah, because YouTube
on Sparkline Capital.
Yeah, YouTube sends me an email. My wife doesn't see me for 7 hours. That's like, so I went back and read this piece, and there were just some interesting pieces to it. What the piece is about is it's about platform companies and looking at why they're successful, the rise of them, etc. So I just want to drop a few facts because I went down this little rabbit hole, and I'd love to chat with some of them. So one is it defines platform companies as companies that externalize their means of production. Okay. Simple enough definition. One chart I really enjoyed in there just for fun was it was labeled the platform parade of IPOs. And so going back just over the last couple of years, it was showing Lyft, Uber, Zoom, Pinterest, Fiverr, Slack, Snowflake, Unity, DoorDash, Airbnb, right? It just like showed this parade. Yeah. And then it labeled like the OGs of platforms, the platform predecessors of Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Meta, Facebook. That it did say Facebook. Meta was my terminology because this was a year ago, but it just talked about those. And then something I hadn't thought about was the types of businesses that a platform can be in, and it labeled two of them, which I think it may have pulled from someone else's research. But one is transactional, and those are platforms that serve as intermediaries for direct exchanges or transactions between users, and innovation platforms, which provide a technological foundation upon which other firms develop complementary innovations. So either you are a place where people can connect directly, or you provide a technological means for other people to build upon. So those are the two types of platforms. Examples being on transaction like Facebook, eBay, right, or different types of transactional platforms. And then you have on the innovation side, like AWS, right? Some of the enterprise software companies like Salesforce or Apple or like NVIDIA, right? Or like examples of innovation platforms. So they use this fancy dancy natural language processing, which basically means look at a whole bunch of words and then tell people what they don't see. And so they use that to say that platforms over the past 12 years have outperformed by 8.1% per year over the S&P 500. If you just invested in platform companies across the S&P 500, they would have outperformed the overall S&P 500. So that was equal weighted or market cap weighted. Basically, it was around 8%.
Yeah, let me jump in there, and then I want to hear more. So that's a much broader definition of platforms than I think about in terms of, gosh, that's almost all technology companies in my eyes. Like when I was thinking platforms initially, I was thinking Roku, Spotify, Netflix type things. And you've seen all those companies struggle with wholesale transfer pricing power and work on creating their own content. Calling Facebook and Salesforce a platform is something I just got to get used to, but I can, but I would wonder when you talk about that outperformance piece, how much of that is coming from what I think are really great businesses in a way, like Salesforce and Facebook, versus how much is coming from like a Spotify, which I'm not sure if Spotify has ever turned a profit. If so, it's happened recently, and it's based on their podcasting and content creation push. They struggled with that for a long time.
A part of this, you could just say, is that according to this definition, all companies are becoming platforms. Like it's like another way per year with the looser definition. I think to your point, like examples of companies that aren't platforms. McDonald's was like that was literally an example they gave of a company that's not a platform.
Like so, eBay is a classic platform, right? They take a commission, they put buyers and sellers together. You could even say Craigslist is a platform. To me, that's an entirely different business model than Spotify. But it just, because you say, eBay says this is the value we provide, and we take X percent of the sales price. Like, and I think that can be a win-win-win in a way that Ariana Grande, or who, name your artist, isn't going like, oh my goodness, look at all the money they just made off me. Well, and it would really be Sony Music or BMG or whoever owns those rights. We're charging them more the next time we negotiate, and those negotiation windows, there's 3 to 5 years. So I guess my learning here is I had way too narrow a definition of a platform and was only thinking about it in the content creation space.
Or maybe you didn't. I think it might just be. I mean, because it might just be that the word platform has now become too representative. I think could be the other example. But the difference of what your definition seemingly, and this one might come close. It's not quite to the transaction versus innovation, because in transaction, from their definitions, what they're saying is transaction means you're connecting two parties. Like this is a place where you connect two parties. That's that first example you gave, eBay. And innovation platforms, they're saying that we provide this technology and you bring your stuff to us. You can build your stuff on top of us. And like that's the Spotify example. You retain ownership of your thing, but we provide this technology that allows your thing to be better. When you put those two things together, it does cover so much. I mean, there's so much of what exists today out there. But it was an interesting read for me, coming off of my fury of thinking, is it about which would you rather be, the owner of the content itself or the owner of the platform? And many companies today are saying yes to that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, in your example with ABC, ESPN, that $15 a month that YouTube took off your bill and then added back to your bill, I don't think it's public, but YouTube / Google / Alphabet did not pay. They are not paying Disney $15 a month to provide those services. It's something less than that. So there's a margin there, and this is the great bundling unbundling conversation. But like Disney Plus, ESPN has their own streaming service because of some of these challenges. They have Disney Plus, they have ESPN Plus, like they have all these other things here. And I guess I always wonder why, when they know the true value of that in the market is $15 a month, they don't turn around, screw their platform providers, and say, we are going direct to consumer at $15 a month, or maybe at $14 a month. Like, fascinating stuff here. I wish I had more answers. I don't.
I'm not sure there are answers. It's just an interesting conversation, and we'll see. We'll see if the whole world turns into a platform.
Let me follow up with one more thing. So, in terms of the investment hypothesis piece, do you find that intriguing, and are you potentially targeting platforms?
Not in any sort of a thesis kind of way, like not in like an explicit way, but I do think that there is a lot of power in platforms. I mean, we talked a good amount about NVIDIA last week, and NVIDIA's multiple, like as ridiculous as it is, the reason it has some premium multiple, right? Not the reason it has this much of a premium multiple, but the reason it has any premium multiples, because it is a platform. Because when people are talking about NVIDIA, they're not talking about what NVIDIA itself is going to create, but they're talking about what others can create off of NVIDIA. That's why, when it went up 12% that one day, whatever, a couple months ago, is because they said, oh, the metaverse is going to be big. If the metaverse will be big, they'll need NVIDIA, right? So it's like there's an additional story that feeds a premium off of platform. And so I do think that there's a there. And I also think, per this conversation, that there's a place to be careful of, because you can get out way over your skis if you put too much on the fact that your platform is going to be the reason, if you don't own the use cases of the platform, I'll say, itself. And so I think it can get a little bit dangerous, but I do generally like platform, even as within business. I'll say in companies that I've been in the operating side, we have thought a lot over the years about how to become the platform of whatever it might be, not of an entire industry necessarily, but how do we enable others to then get value from the thing that we are, like a indirect value from the thing that we're creating? Because then you get passive income, quote unquote, more passive income off of it. So,
well, I get really excited about the use case in certain areas, like when Amazon and Walmart copied this, or maybe Walmart was there, but when they were providing enough value that they were getting tons of views to their website, and then they built a marketplace effectively where people that weren't Amazon could buy and sell goods and pay them a small fee. It increased the value of their platform even more because they had more goods and services there, and it gave them that passive income piece. I mean, it made them a more dominant player. Lots of people had copied that. To me, that's a no-brainer, and that is a really exciting investment hypothesis. I'm still not sure about the Spotifys of the world, but Spotify now, what, they pay Joe Rogan $200 million over his contract, and they're creating a lot of their own content. So also, I should give a shout out. I had forgotten Sparkline Capital is Kai Wu's firm. They do really interesting research consistently. That's worth a follow online.
Yeah, they do. They do. I was joking about the definition of natural language processing earlier, but yeah, they do interesting stuff. And Kai Wu's a former GMO, right? Which we've talked about a good amount. Grantham Mayo and Oppenheimer. That sounds made up. Grantham though. Grantham is sure.
The guy's French. Monterre is really smart dude. And then I don't know the O off the top of my head.
So I got one. Houston, we got one. But he former GMO. Yes, they do some smart stuff, data driven stuff. It's provocative if nothing else. Like it gets you to think.
Yes, which we like.
All right,
what else is in your fishbowl?
I'm gonna quiz you for a sec so we can get one last embarrassment for the year.
Great.
You ready for it?
Yeah.
Okay. Visual Capitalist, which I think we both enjoy from time to time, came out with a map of the U.S., broke it down by state, and asked and used some data from a recent migration policy survey from 2009, the American Community Survey, and it was looking at the languages that are spoken in households in the U.S. So what they came out with was this map that said if you take out English and Spanish, so because English and Spanish dominate, if you take those out, what is the most common language spoken in each state? Okay, so you get the concept here.
This is my type of quiz because this is completely worthless knowledge.
Exactly. So, but it's not. It's actually not. So, if you look at the language that is a number one spoken language outside of English and Spanish in the most states, what language is it?
I don't have good rationale for this, but I feel like it's German.
It's Chinese.
Okay, that was my rational guess.
And they said they included both Mandarin and Cantonese, so just Chinese broadly. But the number of states, I don't know, but it's something like, if I just look at the map and eyeball it, it's something like 20.
Okay,
like is the number.
Yeah, that was really what I was gonna say, but I didn't.
Not sure what that means. So that's why it is important. The reason I say that it's not completely worthless, because that says something. If about half of you take out English and Spanish, I get that. But if you have nearly half of our states where the number 3, at least language, is Chinese, that says something.
Where I would push back is because you take out the 2 most populous solutions to this problem, like you could be talking about 5% of households, you could be talking about 0.5% of households. I don't really know. And so that's my challenge to it.
Yeah, it's about 4 million people in the US. So it's like 5% of foreign language speakers. But the reason I think that one is important is that the US has the most Chinese speakers in the world outside of China.
Yeah.
That's meaningful. Like it's like when you think about U.S.-China relations, like it's not an immaterial number of people in this country that are Chinese. I think is kind of the point as we go through this. Whereas if you go to China, it likely, I don't know the numbers, but it likely is an immaterial number of people that are American that are in China. And so like China likely has less like American like feelings or ties than Americans have Chinese feelings and ties. We don't have to talk about that. This is more about a quiz. I'm taking it. Now I'm getting talk about over your skis. Okay. So now here's an interesting one. So if you look at the number of people, so not the number of states this time, but what is the number 2? Like what's number 2 Chinese is number one. Also, it's by people and by states. But
Okay.
what's the number two most spoken language by number of people?
So, I mean, I don't know if you're trying to confuse me, because what's happening with China is the large population of that country is dominating. So I'm not sure if you're trying to throw me towards another country with a very large population, but I still think there's got to be something with European heritage in here.
You're in the wrong continent.
I'm
So
wrong.
I'm just gonna like no. It's Tagalog,
Interesting.
which is so from the Philippines. What's most interesting is it's number two by number of people, but only one state is at number one in. So there's only one state. Guess what state that is?
I mean, you're making me feel really stupid. I have no idea.
Utah.
Oh, wow. Fascinating.
There it is. There it is. We can wrap the quiz there. We could go into some depths, but I came across this. That was an interesting visualization. When I first saw the title of this, I was like, most like common foreign language is definitely Spanish. But when they cut out Spanish, I was like, oh, okay, this is actually like there's gonna be some stuff I do not know. But there that is, quiz for you. Last quiz maybe of the year.
Yeah. Well, who would have thought that Utah was going to rep its diversity muscles on this podcast? Nice work, Utah.
There you go, Utah. All right, fishbowl dip.
It's one more crypto thing. It's Dan Moorhead at Pantera Capital. They are a crypto firm, so let's think about the author and what they're trying to push, what book they're trying to sell, as we like to joke. But there's some fascinating stuff in here. So his hypothesis has been and continues to be that crypto is the most asymmetric trade in a generation. He starts by saying the cryptocurrency market cap is $2.5 trillion today. And if you put that in context of other financial institutions, I guess you'll call it, here's some numbers. Global digital payments is a $5 trillion market. So there's no reason crypto shouldn't eat that if corporations ever get to trust it. Gold is a $10 trillion market. So people talk about Bitcoin as digital gold. The Bitcoin bulls will tell you that the Bitcoin market cap is going to be at least 10 trillion. Global M2 money supply is 100 trillion, and global bonds are $120 trillion. Let me get an initial reaction from you. You think crypto eats any of those markets?
I go back to what I've brought up, the question I brought up a couple times, and we've discussed.
Yeah.
Is the technology behind, I think, fuels a lot of stuff. I think it can be really interesting. The coins themselves, why?
That's totally fair. I'm not a Bitcoin bull or even a crypto bull at this point. I'm still very skeptical. But again, you go back a year, I've said I think this is the most fascinating technology being developed in like the financial space, and I still feel that way. So I end up reading more about it. Let me throw just like a couple interesting stats from this, and we won't talk about it. He does an analysis. I haven't double checked the math on the total fixed income outstanding worldwide, and comes up with a number around $50 trillion. To give you some context there, corporate bonds are about 10 trillion, mortgage-backed securities maybe 11 trillion, treasuries are 21 trillion, and municipals are about 4 trillion. I never see it sliced that way. That's an interesting
that
figure
is
for
interesting.
me.
That is really interesting.
And then he did a breakdown of global consumer price inflation with a few select countries. I also thought this was fascinating. So Brazil at more than 10% currently. Russia's in the 7% range. US and Mexico hovering around 6%. All of Europe is now pushing 4%, and the UK is in that range too. So I didn't really know if the inflation scares were a US only thing or a worldwide thing. It appears, again, he wants it to be. He wants inflation to be a problem because that's good for his Bitcoin hypothesis. But it appears that inflation is happening in the world over.
And as we talked about, Turkey, 21%. And so they're cutting interest rates further.
Well, and Doogles, did you see the noise they made this week? They actually managed to strengthen the lira slightly. And I didn't dive into that, but that's something worth watching going forward.
This is an experiment. Unfortunately, it's an experiment on people. like through economy. But it's an experiment that it's going to be fascinating to watch, because you have a president of a country that is diametrically opposed to raising interest rates with a 21% inflation on his back. And so he's just cutting and cutting. Like we're going to see what happens.
So I wish I could remember exactly what they did this week, but the Wall Street Journal had this awesome article on percentage of citizens' holdings that were in the lira versus another currency in their bank accounts. And it had reached the point where more than half of the currency was being held outside of the lira. And then with news this week, it flipped back, and there's more confidence in the lira than there has been in the last several weeks. Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. I'll get an update to the folks next episode. All right, back to the fishbowl. Anything else for you, Douglas?
What it is, last topic of the year. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week by James McIntosh, our boy, James McIntosh.
Yeah, our boy. Go back and listen. We had a debate on negative interest rates.
So he came out, always smart writing by James. The name of the piece is the Fed deflating prospects for speculative stocks. And so what the question that's being raised per the title is whether this big decrease in some of the 2020 and early 2021 heavy hitters, like Tesla, as an example, the stocks that just like really took off, and this includes meme stocks too, like GameStop early this year, whether the recent Fed announcement is part of the reason why they're getting hit so hard. Recent Fed announcement being that they're going to be raising interest rates next year and they're stopping the bond purchasing earlier. He's saying, is that what's going on? And he basically comes out, and from the beginning, because James McIntosh is writing this, it's not going to be a straightforward answer. But what he basically came out and said is no, like that there's not really evidence. Like there's tangential like relationships between these things happen, but there's not really evidence. One of the quotes he put out there that I really liked was, "No one buys GameStop, let alone Bitcoin, because of a discounted cash flow model."
So true.
Absolutely right.
That's a really good one.
Absolutely right. So he's like, so then if you raise interest rates or like bond yields, like raise, like what does it matter for your model?
Your DFC doesn't change.
Exactly. But what it got me thinking about this article was something we've talked about a couple times here on the pod around inflows this year. And so what the piece raised for me was that no one is feeding the story anymore. Like these are story-based stocks for the most part. And there was so much inflow, right? What was it? It was the inflows from this year were more than the past 21 or 19 years, I think it was, combined. It was something outrageous. Yeah. And so even just stopping record inflows will cause these stocks to go down. Like that by itself, I think is fascinating. If you're not feeding the stories, right? So inflows are going down. And the market was something that was driven by new money coming in, like excessive new money coming in. And so people deciding, I'm actually just going to leave it in my savings account, like, we'll do it. And by people, I mean retailers, not like everybody, because you have your institutional investors are doing their thing, right? Institutional investors, not everyone, but many have kind of been saying that these stocks aren't what they're into for a while anyway. And so if you stop the retail mania, stop that story, that it's like that alone can drive down stocks like this. And so that was what I like, something I thought was interesting. I don't know if you find that interesting too, that concept interesting, but it was what this article got me thinking about.
I do. I mean, I don't follow the institutional investors unless they make a bunch of noise like Cathie Wood, but I don't really know institutional investors outside of Cathie Wood that are saying Tesla buy right now, to your point. And I don't really know retail investors that are saying Tesla's a buy right now, to use one specific example. I went through the Scott McNally quote from 2002 last week about how expensive 10 times revenue is, and Tesla and NVIDIA are closer to 30 times revenue right now. I think it gets really hard to make an investment hypothesis at that point.
It reminded me, maybe this is a loose analogy, let me know, but it kind of reminded me of our conversations around the supply chain this year too, because there was a lot of chatter about how the supply chain is weak on the supply side. And then we've had a couple conversations about how it's the demand side. We brought in some articles that we'd read and whatnot around it's the demand is so excessive that even though supply is actually over where it has been historically, it can't keep up with demand. It feels like somewhat similar to me. That it's just the demand for stocks was so excessive, especially by retail folks and in these story stocks, because they were the stories, that just by taking the insane amount of like excessive demand out, I don't want to say just excessive, like it's outrageously excessive. By taking that out, you're going to start to see the true colors of the market.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that's a really good analogy because the demand for stocks, especially story stocks, was unlike anything we've seen in the past 2 decades in 2021. And just the fact that that has cooled slightly has ramifications that maybe don't mean there's significant market swing. There's not significant swings in how people feel about investing or those specific investments. There's just not the same crazy demand that there was earlier in the year.
What happens when people go back to work and can't just sit around buying stocks? Like,
I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
Oh, 2022. What does the year have in store for us?
I can't wait.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do. We have exciting news coming in 2022. I'll promise you that. We've done 52 straight episodes. We hope to continue that with maybe a slight break here or there. We won't miss more than 2 weeks in a row. Thanks for going on the ride with us, guys. It's really fun to celebrate episode 52 with you. You can always hit us up and find us where, Doogles?
On Substack is where we do our writing. It's skippyanddoogles.substack.com. What about that Twitter?
At Skippy Doogles. skippydoogles@gmail.com. Also, on the Substack piece, I think we'll have more content coming for you shortly. And then hit us with a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, please. That helps more people find the show.
Thank you for a great 2021. It was a lot of fun spending time with y'all.
Happy holidays. Peace.